The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users. On demand on iTunes and on YouTube and on my site, GaryBaumgarten.com, where I comment on the news and let you comment as well. You do not have to agree with the author. And thanks to our friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio. We are syndicated coast to coast across the United States into 12 million additional households. I'm your host, Gary Baumgarten. Well, we know pretty much who the Republican candidate for President of the United States will be. It's John McCain. And we also know that Obama seems to be leading in the polls pretty substantially against Hillary Clinton, yet Hillary decided that she wanted to remain in the race nevertheless. Well, how accurate are the polls? And is it just the news media and you and I, the consumer of news and voters who are watching these polls? Or are the candidates themselves reading them and then deciding whether or not they ought to, for example, in the case of Hillary Clinton, remain in the race? Well, as all of you know, I only have to say it's one of those brands. It's like Coca-Cola or Xerox, a brand that is immediately known. All I have to do is say Gallup poll, and you immediately think credibility. Of course, because the Gallup poll gives us years and years of accurate polling of many things, but especially politics. Frank Newport, the editor-in-chief of Gallup poll, is our guest today. The Gallup poll is actually tracking the presidential campaign on a daily basis. The latest tracking finds Barack Obama with a 10-point lead over Hillary Clinton in the race for the Democratic nomination for president. That's the largest lead that Obama has enjoyed, and it indicates a marked rebound from the days he struggled after the controversy over his former pastor, Jeremiah Wright, surfaced. I welcome to News Talk Online, editor-in-chief of the Gallup poll. You know him, ladies and gentlemen, Frank Newport. Welcome to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
Well, thank you. Good to be with you.
It's a pleasure having you here with us. Let me ask you before I ask the obvious question about Obama and this seemingly insurmountable lead that he has over Hillary Clinton. Why do you publish a daily snapshot? That doesn't really give us opportunity for trends to be established. Are these daily polls really indicative of anything?
Well, certainly they are. They do actually enable us to get trends because we are putting these in the context of all the interviewing we've done since January 2nd. We report out actually a 3-day rolling average where we put the latest 3 days together to kind of smooth out a little of the ups and downs. But it's precisely because it gives us trends that we think it's interesting and important. For example, when the Jeremiah Wright controversy first hit the news, we were able to monitor and see day by day that Hillary Clinton started climbing and Barack Obama fell. And then after he made his speech in Philadelphia and did some other things, we were able to monitor day by day where he came back up again and now has moved back out ahead. So I think our ability here at Gallup to do 1,000 interviews a day and to follow this gives us an unparalleled portrait of exactly how this is playing out, rather than just sticking our toes in the water, every 2 or 3 weeks, which has more traditionally been the case.
How accurate are these polls? I know that we saw polls going into primaries which indicated one candidate or the other was going to win, and it turned out those polls were wrong. I also note that most of the exit polling on an election day, and I don't know whether Gallup involves itself in election polling, seems to be pretty accurate. I mean, what compels me, if I'm the person on the other end of the phone when you call, or the person walking outside of the polling booth, to answer your questions accurately? And how can you judge whether, I mean, maybe I just throw something in there. If you're only interviewing 200 people or 300 people, and it's supposed to be representative of the likely voters nationally, 1 or 2 people probably could skew those results by deliberately answering incorrectly, couldn't they?
Well, one or two people probably won't, but those are good questions that have been asked ever since we've had polling, going back to when George Gallup did his first polling back in the 1936 presidential election, Alf Landon versus Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was coming up for re-election. Well, there are many. Polling is a complex process, and there are many steps to it, and things can go wrong at any step. So you have to be very careful about this. It's kind of like launching a man to the moon. You could have trouble with the booster rocket. You could have trouble with the command module that circles the moon. You could have trouble with the landing module. You have lots of trouble at different spots. We have monitor our sampling. Are we getting a good sampling of the people, so that they're representative of the population? And then are we asking the questions correctly? Are they telling us the truth, so to speak? And then are we analyzing the data correctly, in the computers? There are a lot of places where things can go wrong. But generally speaking, it works pretty well. It is true that in New Hampshire this year, the voters confounded us. Most pollsters, a couple of days before the election, thought Obama was doing well coming off of Iowa. And, of course, Hillary Clinton won by 2 points. But other than New Hampshire, the polling has generally been pretty predictive of what's happened in most of the primary states, and certainly it has been in previous presidential elections in years prior to this.
I have a comment in text in our virtual auditorium here on Paltalk.com. The writer says, polling is never reliable. With 360 million Americans, how can a sample of a few hundred people be considered as the pulse of a nation? Excellent question for Dr. Frank Newport from the Gallup poll.
Well, I would ask that listener or viewer, next time he or she goes to the doctor, to refuse to let the doctor just take a sample of their blood, instead to drain every bit of it out of their body to get their cholesterol. They certainly believe that a sample can work in that situation. So we certainly believe that if done correctly, if you take a true random sample of 1,000 people, for example, if they are randomly selected from all possible people, scientifically the basis can be shown through mathematics that the sample distribution will in fact represent what we would have gotten had we interviewed everybody in the population. So it does work.
One of the other callers is asking about the Bradley effect in polling. I don't even know what that refers to, but perhaps you can educate me on that.
Yes, that's been discussed a lot this year. It's about the impact of race of the race of a candidate on polling. Tom Bradley was a black individual running for mayor in Los Angeles, and the thinking was at the time that people would say to a pollster, yes, I'm going to vote for him, a black man, a black candidate. But when they went in the secrecy of the polling booth, they backed off, and white voters didn't. So ever since then, there's been this discussion, is there an effect where people will tell you